Doctor, good morning.
Morning.
You're being called as a witness by Ms. Geyser and Attorney Cotton, so I'm going to ask you to, if you can stand, raise your right hand. Our clerk will swear you in.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter before the court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Very good, thank you. Then you may be seated. State your full name and spell your last name.
Kenneth Robbins, Robbins.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robbins. Then we're prepared to proceed. Attorney Cotton.
Yes, before we begin with questions, Your Honor, I've tendered Exhibit C, which is Dr. Robbins' CV. I've actually just put him up here by your clerk. But I move for admission of his curriculum vitae and his report, which is Exhibit D. There's no objection.
So I have, okay, so what I have is Exhibit C and D. C is Dr. Robbins' CV. D is his report. Any objections from the state?
No.
All right, then received. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Robbins.
Good morning, Mr. Cotton.
Thank you for being here. I understand you're by Zoom from California.
That's correct.
If you have any trouble hearing us, just let us know at any point, okay?
I will, thank you.
Doctor, I'm assuming that you are out of the fire.
I'm sorry, that I'm out of the...
That you're out of the fire.
Yes, I'm in Northern California, thank you.
All right, very good, thank you.
Glad you're safe.
Thank you.
Now, you are the Director of Mental Health for the Tribal Health of Lake County right now?
That's accurate.
And you're also the psychiatry consultant for a hospice center?
Correct.
Are you a consultant for the Winnebago Mental Health Institute? And if so, what do you do?
Yes, I am, and what I do is I go over cases with the nurse practitioners and physician assistants to help them when they're struggling.
And you're an adjunct professor at UW-Madison?
Correct.
Are you do you have any affiliation with the Mendota Mental Health Institute?
I was the medical director at Mendota for most of the 1990s.
You were the medical director?
Correct.
Okay. And you're a doctor of psychiatry, are you not?
I'm a medical doctor with a specialty in both internal medicine and psychiatry, yes.
And you have board certification in the same?
I do.
As well as neurology?
Well, psychiatry and neurology is one board, but my board certification is in psychiatry.
Got it. Dr. Robbins, you've had a long history with Ms. Geyser, would you agree?
Yes, I would agree.
Going back how far, if you can recall?
Going back to shortly after the original criminal contact back in 2014.
And you've been appointed by the court to conduct an evaluation in this case for conditional release.
Exactly.
Are you familiar with the criteria that have to be considered when determining whether a person should be released?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Specifically, whether a person is a danger to themselves or others, whether they're a risk for substantial bodily harm or property damage, right?
Exactly.
Now, did you keep the statutory factors in mind when you conducted your analysis in this case?
Yes.
And did you prepare a report?
I did.
Let's walk through do you have your report in front of you today, Dr. Robbins, or no?
I do.
Okay. If you need to refer to it, you can just let us know if you need to, but I'll just ask you some questions from that report, okay?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to make one correction. And I only noticed it as I read through it here in California, but what I say in the first sentence is not accurate. It says that that I'd interviewed her on February 21st of 2024, which I did,
Right.
but I didn't update it. my most recent interview was November 13th, if
Right.
you don't mind me making the correction.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. You did interview her back in February, but you've also conducted a more current interview, right?
Exactly.
And so the conclusions in this report are based on the current interview and your current analysis of Ms. Geyser,
Exactly.
as well as your history of her condition in your review of records.
Correct.
What if anything, did you do in preparation for this report? Did you speak with any professionals at Winnebago, or did you review any records?
I did. So I reviewed all of the Winnebago records, and I did speak with the psychiatrist who's been working with her.
In your review of when you say you reviewed all the records, what does that mean?
I went through her computerized medical records and updated myself on her behaviors and what the various professionals at Winnebago have written about her since I last saw her.
Are you, you're aware of the current diagnoses that the professionals are operating under, are you not?
I am.
Is Ms. Geyser receptive to her diagnoses?
She is.
Is she being treated?
She is.
You note, so as we walk through your report, you indicate that it was the opinion on page two, in the sort of the middle paragraph, you indicate that it was the opinion of multiple psychiatrists and psychologists that Ms. Geyser met the criteria for schizophrenia based on a variety of symptoms that were observed back when this offense happened. Do you still believe that to be true?
Yes.
But you note that this is your language, the conceptualization of her psychotic challenges has changed significantly in the last 2 years. What do you mean by that?
So a couple of years ago, she had her third round of psychological testing, and for the first time, it didn't support that she had psychotic symptoms. And the psychiatrist who was working with her at that time, Dr. Kayla Pope, who's the medical director at Winnebago, felt both based on her interview with Ms. Geyser and based on that testing that the diagnosis needed to be reconsidered, that there was no longer support for a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and ultimately the diagnosis was changed to primarily post-traumatic stress disorder, along with social anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and autism spectrum disorder. So the psychotic diagnosis, the diagnosis of schizophrenia was eliminated after she was weaned off of her antipsychotic medication, and there was no return of any psychotic symptoms.
Does that mean that Ms. Geyser was somehow faking it back in 2014
No, I don't believe that to be true.
as a 12-year-old or so?
Correct.
What do you believe to be true?
So I'm not certain. I think, as I put in my report, I think either she was experiencing transient psychotic symptoms, which is to say psychotic symptoms that didn't persist and gradually went away, which is certainly something that's possible, or the intensity of her fantasies based on some of the trauma she had experienced were so intense that she believed them to be true.
The trauma being her sexual abuse by her father.
Exactly.
And you note in your report that in 2023, Dr. Pope, meaning the medical director of Winnebago, identified the fact that Morgan had a breakthrough with her mother related to that, and the mother acknowledged all the red flags that existed about the abuse.
Exactly. Up until that point, Morgan's belief was that her mother had not believed the things that she said, and her mother came around and began to recognize that Morgan's reporting had been accurate, and she had not believed her, and having her mother come around was really quite traumatic for her.
And with her mother's support, they reopened a legal case against the father and made a report, right?
Exactly.
Now, what Dr. Pope recommended is that Morgan be weaned off some of the antipsychotic medication to see whether she would deteriorate. Isn't that how it was approached?
That's exactly how it was approached.
Is that the right way to do it as a psychiatrist? Is that the right way to approach a situation like this?
Yeah, if there's a question about whether someone truly has psychosis and they're on antipsychotic medication, gradually weaning them off the antipsychotic medications and seeing how that impacts symptoms is absolutely the right way to do this.
So that was done in this case, and how is it unfolded?
There's been no return of what appears to be psychotic symptoms. She's done very well off antipsychotic medication.
Is it important to maintain some medication regimen with Miss Geyser? Is she still medicated though?
She is still on medication, really to treat her anxiety symptoms that are associated with the diagnoses I mentioned earlier.
You note that Miss Geyser's behavior has improved significantly since 2021. There was a suicide attempt way back then. Has there been any evidence of aggression or danger to herself since 2021?
There's really been no danger of aggression throughout her hospitalization. And since that 2021 incident, there has been no evidence of any suicidal ideation.
Does Miss Geyser report a better relationship with her family as time has gone on?
Yes, particularly with her mother and her brother.
She has a very supportive relationship with her brother?
Correct.
And things have improved to some degree with her mother?
Exactly.
Now, Morgan, I'm sorry. Does Miss Geyser have goals for the future that she's discussed with you?
She does.
What are those?
She'd like to ultimately become a therapist working with people with substance use disorders, and recognizes it'll take some time to get trained properly for that. And in the meantime is thinking about other jobs such as working as a librarian.
Librarian.
Yes.
In your professional opinion, are those realistic goals for somebody in Miss Geyser's situation?
Yes, she's it's been clear throughout the testing that she's had that she's very bright and has a lot of potential.
If she were granted conditional release, where would she go?
I don't know, but I guess it would be my recommendation that she go to a group home, that she not go immediately to living independently.
When you were medical director of Mendota.
Correct.
And you consult with Winnebago, and you know the medical director of Winnebago, Kayla Pope, right?
I do.
And so what's the difference between Mendota and Winnebago? Aren't they both just the same type of mental health facility that we have here in Wisconsin?
Well, it's really like one big hospital where Mendota has certain specialties and Winnebago has certain specialties. Winnebago takes the vast majority of involuntary admissions, civil involuntary admissions, and kids and women have been exclusively at Winnebago. Some of that has changed recently, but that's primarily the difference. And then Winnebago doesn't have maximum security, which Mendota does have.
Got it. So let's talk about conditional release as a concept, though. When you were medical director of Mendota, were you involved in people's conditional release planning?
Yes.
How does that process go? In other words, when judge approves conditional release, or if he approves it, what will the facility do? Will they release Miss Geyser right to the community, or what would they do?
They would work with people at the county, in the community, to develop a plan that's safe and that's consistent with what the judge orders.
And do the treatment, does that conditional, is that called a conditional release team?
I don't know. That's not what we called it then, but yeah, that's the basic idea, though.
Or a group of people at the facility that work with the community-based people to come up with a plan for the court.
Exactly.
You mentioned Ms. Geyser going to a group home. She herself recognizes that she would like the opportunity to live in a group home, doesn't she?
Exactly, she does.
In other words, it's not a situation where Ms. Geyser is indicating that she wants to just go right to her own place. She wants to live in a group home and reintegrate in a safe manner, right?
Exactly.
There are group homes in the state of Wisconsin? Is that why you mentioned that?
Yes.
Is it important that Ms. Geyser is engaged in individual and group therapy?
Yes.
Why is that important?
Well, she has very significant anxiety issues, and she has had, I think, what can only be called a bizarre adolescence, and needs help with sort of developmental issues. She has had very limited exposure to peers. She's had very limited access to education and independence. And so she's going to need a lot of help in becoming the mature person that she wants to be.
What's your ultimate conclusion in this case with respect to Ms. Geyser's petition for conditional release?
I believe it's appropriate.
What do you base that on?
Essentially that she has had multiple opportunities to be in the community and has done very well. And that I think there's nothing to suggest that she is a danger to herself or others. And I think there's very little at this point that Winnebago can do for her, and that's what they would say as well. I think it's in her interest and in everybody's interest to try to help her now become the person she can become.
Well, I want to push back on that. I mean, one might say she's locked in Winnebago, nobody's being harmed, leave her there. What's the problem? What's the problem with doing it that way? It's not hurting her.
Yeah, I guess there's no, first of all, there's no treatment any longer that Winnebago has to offer her that's going to be useful. So there's nothing that she has to gain by being there. Second, there's nothing to suggest that would be dangerous outside of Winnebago. She's done nothing to suggest she's dangerous at Winnebago to others. And since 2021, nothing to suggest she's dangerous to herself. And third, she's a young woman with great potential, and she's not going to realize that unless she has an opportunity to get into the world and start to have more interpersonal interactions that are appropriate with peers, that she has more education opportunities, that she has the opportunity to be independent in a more significant way.
In terms of her future dangerousness as we try to predict it, is it your opinion that it would therefore make her less dangerous? It would make Ms. Geyser less dangerous if she's given the opportunity to move to a group home and expand her growth as an individual?
I don't think she's going to become dangerous to other people, whether she's at Winnebago or not. I think that there is the risk that over time, if she is limited by the things that Winnebago can offer her, I could imagine her becoming hopeless at some point and potentially becoming a danger to herself. So yes, perhaps ironically, I think she would be safer outside of Winnebago.
So from your professional opinion, her risk to others sort of remains the same in or out. You don't see that changing. But you use the word ironically, the risk to herself, self-injurious behavior increases the longer she would remain at Winnebago without the opportunity to expand herself.
I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned at some point she's going to start feeling hopeless.
That she's just locked there forever.
That she's locked there forever, that she can't become the person she wants to become, that she can't have the kind of interactions she wants with peers and with family.
Was that part of your analysis in this case, that In fact, institutional placement increases her risk of danger to herself.
Yes, I do think that's true.
And a group home would diminish that because she would be given, although certainly not unfettered liberty in a group home, right?
Correct.
They can use GPS monitoring and any other tool they want to keep an eye on a person, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so not unfettered liberty, but some small degree of freedom, and that would enable her, you said she has immense potential, or you said great potential, so she'd be able to start realizing her potential more fully
Exactly.
in contributing positively to society.
Exactly.
Now, it is possible that as Miss Geyser lives her life, that there could be a reappearance, if you will, of psychotic symptoms. That can happen, right?
Possible.
So, so how does that get managed for an individual if and when she's released to make sure that if that occurs, it's addressed? How do we focus on that?
Well, that's why I think it's so important that she continue to receive individual and group therapy, that she continue to work with psychiatrists, that she continue to work with a therapist. Um, she is a very insightful young woman, and I am sure that um, if those symptoms return, which I think, by the way, is very unlikely, but if they were to recur, as long as she has people she's working with who she can talk with about it, I am sure they would be appropriately addressed.
You indicate in conclusion section 3 that it's your opinion Winnebago mental health is not a, quote, healthy place for Miss Geyser to remain. Do you still hold that opinion?
Exactly. I do.
And that has nothing to do with the staff. They have a very good staff and good professionals there. It has to do with Miss Geyser's growth as an individual.
That's fair.
At your time at Winnebago, you had the opportunity, you had occasion to interact with people who had been housed there for many years, if not decades, I imagine.
I have.
And does it become easier or harder to reintegrate people to society and to have a reintegration to the normal world the longer they remain inside a facility like Mendota or Winnebago?
You know, it really depends on the individual, but certainly for Ms. Geyser, the longer she's there at this point, I think that more challenging it's going to be to reintegrate.
So one of the reasons you support release at this stage, and you supported release 6 months ago or 8 months ago when we were last in court, right?
That's true.
And in fact, between your last evaluation and this one, there's been absolutely no, are you aware of any violence or any concerns that have developed in that interim period of time that would cause you to revisit those opinions?
No, and she certainly had plenty of opportunity to be in the community, to be stimulated by being in the community, which was what sometimes we worry about, and she's done extremely well.
Those supervised outings that she has in the community, how do those typically unfold? Do you know how that works?
I'm not sure what you mean.
It's a group of people leave the facility and they just have a chaperone who keeps an eye on them, or what do they do?
Yeah, exactly. They usually have a specific goal in mind. They go out for a particular reason, and could be to go shopping, and could be to go visit something, something that they may learn something from, and they're in the community with a chaperone.
So ultimately, you remain of the opinion that Ms. Geyser should be released on conditional supervision with, at this point, to a group home with continued monitoring and treatment.
Exactly.
Thank you. That's all.